Hello, captains out there. This is Kent, and welcome to this episode of the Flight Show. And today, what I wanted to talk about are if you are a flight simmer who is new to the flight sim world, Flight Simulator 10, Flight Simulator 10 Steam Edition, Prepar3D 1, 2, 3, or 4, or even X-Plane, and you're kind of getting into it and you're really liking it. You're looking at the videos online on YouTube and you're like, wow, look at all that terrain that they're flying through, or why don't the airports that I have look that good? And it's probably because you're looking at all the default airports that are they reminiscent of what happens of the airports in real life, but they're not exact replicas. And particularly in Flight Simulator and Prepared, there's some airports that they put a lot more effort into than others, like O'Hare Airport, Frankfurt. They look a little bit more like the real airports, but they're still far from the exact replicas. So the way they do it is that there are these things called third-party software, and people can buy them to basically make their worlds look more detailed. So to anybody who is into Flight Simulator and has been doing it a while, this is nothing new. But this show is really for those that are like brand new to Flight Simulator, and they're looking at all these videos and they're talking about all these things, but they're making these assumptions that you already know a lot. I'm trying to focus on the basics because I believe everything complicated is rooted in several things that are simple. So if we can get you off to a good start, you're going to really enjoy your flight simming experience, and I'm hoping this is going to open up to an entire world that inspires you to maybe build a home cockpit, or even go on and out and get your pilot's license, or if you're younger, or it doesn't matter what age, maybe even fulfill your dream of becoming an airline pilot. Who knows? But we got to start you off somewhere. So the focus of this particular episode is if you're new and you want to know what kind of scenery to buy, what do you do? And I put together a little bit of a rubric to kind of give you some advice as to how to go to buy some software for your terrain and your scenery in a way that'll be most beneficial to you. So why don't we just get started? And so I'm going to do this by actually doing some flying and showing you some things. So let me get my tracker going here. All right. So the first thing I'd have to say to you is, if you want to know what kind of scenery to buy, you have to kind of identify with what kind of flight sim person you are. And what I mean by that is, do you like flying general aviation aircraft like Cessnas, Carinado, Beechcraft, or twin engine general aviation airplanes? Okay, if you're into general aviation, then I think there's a certain kind of software that would be more beneficial for you. But if you are into flying commercial airliners like the Airbus series, Airbus 318, 319, 320, 321, or the Boeing series where you'd be flying a 737, 767, a 777, or 747, yeah, okay, then there's a different set of scenery that I think that you might want to start off on. Now, check this out. So as you can see here, I'm flying out of, if you don't recognize it, this is Fort Lauderdale International, or the ICAO number, or ICAO designation is KFLL. If you didn't know, the ICAO designation stands for the International Civil Aviation Organization, and this is how they basically tell you what kind of airport it is without having to say the entire name. So if you were coming out in a general aviation, notice what happened. You take off, and unless you're going to fly around the airport, that's pretty much your experience. And when you're doing general aviation, you're going to spend a little time prepping your airplane, going through your checklists, then you're going to taxi to the runway and you're going to take off. And then that's pretty much your experience with the airport. But what you're going to be doing more than likely is you're going to be flying either VFR, maybe IFR, but you're going to probably be at altitudes anywhere from 2,000 feet to 8,000 feet. So you're going to be kind of close to the ground. And that means that you're going to have the ability to see a lot of ground detail. So if you were going to buy some third-party software in terms of add-ons, if you were deciding, well, do I get an airport or do I get, just terrain or whatever that makes the world look real, if you're into civil, general aviation, hey, our air traffic control wanted to get in on the show, so we'll just turn that off for a minute. All of that is to say that you might want to invest in some general scenery, which we would call terrain scenery or mesh. Now, you know what? I changed the wrong radio. Check this out. So if you are dealing with mesh is basically the topography of your terrain. Like if you're in the mountains, you'd really appreciate this because it's actually the elevations that are out there for the different levels of the ground. And so if you get the fresh out of the box, and that's a figure of speech because we download everything now, if you get your flight simulator fresh out of the box, the terrain is reminiscent of the real world, but it's not as accurate as it could be. So when you order mesh, it's not necessarily adding scenery per se, it's adding elevation changes so it's more representative of what happens in the real world. Now, if you want to have a vibrant and alive world that you are visually looking at, like let's take a look out the window here. Here we're flying outside of Fort Lauderdale, heading south towards Miami, and you see all that on the ground. You see vegetation, the trees, you have that's called autogen vegetation. You have the autogen buildings and so forth. Okay, yeah. Well, that they have that stock out of the box, but it can be updated by ordering a terrain program from different developers such as Orbx. They have a product called FTX Global Base Pack, and it's a global scenery. It runs for $95.99. I think it's $95.95, and it basically adds detailed autogen scenery, rivers, so on and so forth, to your flight simming experience. But on top of that, they have another product called Vector, which adds even more detail to your coastlines, your rivers, train lines, roads, power lines, and so forth. So if you were just starting off in Flight Simulator and you really wanted to kind of get an experience that lets you feel the immersion in the flight simming world, my first suggestion would be, if you're into general aviation, investing in mesh and general terrain, because you're going to want to have something to look at as you're flying around or flying outside the aircraft. Or not outside the aircraft, but like take a look outside the aircraft. Look how incredibly rich and detailed that is. Now, I will point out, this is Prepar3D version 4. And they just took it to a new level on AutoGen and their ability to put objects into your visual experience. And I'm not going to go too much into that because I really want to focus on just the scenery. But I want you to take away from this is, I really want to think about general terrain scenery if I'm into general aviation, because I want to have an immersion into what I'm seeing in between taking off and landing. I'm not going to be at the airports that long. I'll get into that in the airports when we get to the commercial aircraft. Now, the reason I flew out of Fort Lauderdale is I wanted you to see this. You can also, instead of, or in a company, in addition to getting regional software that covers, software that covers the entire globe, you could also buy regions. So here is a product that we're about to fly up on, and it was created by LatinVR, and it's Miami 5 version 2. It's actually Miami version 2 or version 3, I forget. But as you can see, this is the city. This is the skyline and the cityscape of Miami, and it's much more detailed than the stock scenery that comes in Prepar3D or Flight Simulator 10 or Steam Edition, as it were. Oh, just went through some turbulence here. So you can really have a lot of great VFR flying, visual flight rules flying, and having wonderful things to see. Or if you're doing dead reckoning, you're going to have a lot of geographic landmarks to use as cues to help you navigate. So again, if you are in general aviation, you might want to think about investing in a few things like this. Now, you have to also bear in mind, if you're going to get highly detailed terrain and scenery, you want to make sure that you have a computer that can handle the graphics and the rendering, or your frame rates are going to go so low that it kind of takes away from the realism. So, and there are ways to tweak and adjust your detail levels so that it's conducive with the type of computer that you have. Over there, by the way, that's KMIA, or Miami International. That's another third-party software, interestingly enough, made by LatinVR, that complements the Miami scenery. And so I had gotten that actually rather recently. I started off doing the terrain, and maybe one or two airports, but I learned from my experiences that you should really, if you're doing the general aviation, you really want to start off with the terrain. So as you see here with the skyline of Miami, I'm going to turn around and give you an opportunity to kind of see the barrier islands of Miami before we move on to dealing with the commercial aircraft. Now, I would also like to point out that there are other terrain there's other terrain software out there other than just Orbx, but it seems to me that Orbx is kind of like the gold standard. But there are other products out there, and it's really just kind of up to you and what you aesthetically find pleasing, and also what, you know, fits in your pocketbook in terms of what terrain you want to buy. I'll mention that another global type of terrain that you can get is Ground Environment P3D by World Edition, and that's sold on the Flight1 website. And that's particularly for Prepar3D. And I'm not going to get into the politics of this because I know you also have Flight Sim World, who's now moved up to the 64-bit graphics, but they're still in early release. So right now, the juggernauts on the block appear to be, and I'm judging this by kind of the sales of third-party software that's online, the juggernauts on the block are pretty much Prepar3D version 4 and X-Plane 11. I don't have X-Plane 11. I haven't flown in it, but leave some comments if I see there are a lot of people that really like to see some of this from the perspective of X-Plane. You know, I'll get it loaded up and also put out some videos on the basics from that perspective as well. And again, there are a lot of people out there doing great videos and tutorials, but they're kind of on advanced subjects, and I think it gets lost. Well, what about a person who's just getting into Flight Simulator? That's what I'm really focusing on right now. So again, we're focusing on what scenery should I buy if I'm just getting into Flight Simulator. So that being said, as you can see, this is a beautifully rendered rendition of the Miami Sunset Strip. As you can see over here, KMIA, or the Miami International, and the outlying suburbs. You can actually see the ocean liners that are loading up passengers and getting ready to set sail in the detail. So again, general aviation, you're going to be spending a lot of your time flying between place to place. You really want to have something really good to look at, but also the more accurate it is, you're able to have landmarks for your visual navigation, or as some have referred to it as dead reckoning. Now, with that being said, I want to offer you one other thing. Another addition that you want to think about with scenery, and usually this is in a different category. This is called weather. But because it's something that you see outside the cockpit, I'm just going to kind of put it under the umbrella of scenery. You want to think about a good weather texture. Rex is a really good one. So is let me look at my notes. I'm thinking on the fly here, so excuse me. Active Sky also has graphics for making the clouds and the weather look more realistic. Now, if you're from Flight Simulator 10, Flight Simulator 10 actually can download real-world weather, and then the textures just make it look that much more believable. But if you're in Prepar3D, it doesn't download real-world weather. It has stock weather, and you can choose what conditions or make it random, and it'll select a weather condition for you. But if you want real-world weather, you're going to need to use the downloadable weather from Rex. It offers that. But then Active Sky, which is again, I'll use that term, the gold standard, it seems, based on sales. Active Sky is kind of like your leader in the weather generation, along with the textures for your clouds, because they also have their rendition of different cloud art, but so does Rex. So do your research, look at some videos, look at some pictures, and see which one fits your particular fancy for the aesthetic value. All right, so we've now taken our tour of Miami, and we've gotten an idea of what the terrain software, what the benefits are. Remember, do your research, because one set of scenery, you might really like Orbx. Like, I really do love Orbx. But Flight 1's Ultimate Terrain is not bad. In fact, that's what I started off with. Do your research before you spend your money, because a lot of the policies for downloadable content is that you don't get refunds. So see what you like, see what's out there on YouTube, and see recommendations of people from these other videos. And when you see what you really like, then go ahead and invest your money in that. But again, why not airports if I'm into general aviation? Because you're not going to spend a lot of time there. Not as much time as if you're into commercial aircraft. So let's cut from this and hop into our 747 up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and you'll see what I'm talking about there. Okay, so we're back now, and we are at Minneapolis, St. Paul, or KMSP, or the phonetic alphabet, Kilo, Mike, Sierra, Papa. And what do you see out of the window? You see vehicles moving. You see the airport in the waiting area for the passengers. You see the rendering of the baggage carts that are waiting to be taken to the airplanes to move baggage from the airplane to the terminal. And let me tell you something. The vehicles that you see going through the access way, they like always going, like they never take lunch. I mean, like, guys, seriously, you've been working for 24 hours. Take a break. It's cool. Let them know that I said it's all right. They're just always going. So this is part of the immersion when you are into commercial airlines. The benefit of, if you are new to flight sim and you're trying to think about, well, what else scenery do I get? If you're into the commercial airlines, you want to start thinking about a couple of really good airports, in opposed to getting terrain or scenery. And I'll explain my argument in just a moment. But let's start with this. A lot of your time is going to be spent in the air, but there's going to be a significant amount of time spent at the terminal preparing your aircraft and getting to the runway. So, versus when you're in general aviation, where you're flying at an altitude where you're going to see terrain and you want to see that detail, this aircraft is going to be flying so high you're not going to necessarily appreciate that detail. So, but before we get to that, let's just talk about the terminal. You even see the number of the gate. You won't see that in the default airport scenery that you have with Flight Simulator 10, Steam Edition, or Prepar. But when you have the third party, or these developers who make airports, the really good ones are going to have details just like that. Let me take you outside of the airplane and give you an idea of what this scenery looks like. As you can see, this is wonderfully rendered. You have the parking lots and cars parked in the parking lot. You have other aircraft. Well, the artificial intelligence aircraft, or the AI aircraft, that's being provided. You have the stock aircraft in Flight Simulator, but this is actually being provided by Ultimate Traffic Live. I'm becoming like a big fan of it. But again, look around. You see the airport vehicles moving. You have the highly detailed terminals. You have the outlying scenery that just make this just eye candy. You might want to stand at the airport and just look. The taxiways with the wear and the concrete patches, the tire marks from all the excessive landing on the runways. This is one of the best airports I've ever seen. And I just bought it, actually. This airport is actually done by, let's see, I wrote it down. Sorry, I just didn't remember it off the top of my head. Yeah, it's by Flightbeam. And I have totally been sleeping on Flightbeam. These airports, Denver, KDEN or KSFO, San Francisco International, Denver International. These airports are beautiful. I do recommend these if you want to check it out. Now, I want to show you one other thing about why you want to get a really good airport if you're into commercial aircraft. Now, this is not news to anybody that's really been into flight simulations, but if you're new to this, you know that they're jetways, or how the passengers get on the aircraft, and you know, you've seen those before, nothing out of the ordinary. But when you get airports like this, and these airports also utilize what's known as, let me bring it up in my notes, they utilize SODE, or Sim Object Display Engine, you get treated to animations like this. So notice that the jetway is moving away from the aircraft, but I want you to peep out those wheels, the access wheels. The hydraulics actually work. The wheels that pivot to bring the jetway over actually actuate. You don't get that graphic when you're dealing with the default airports. When I saw that, I was like, okay, this is like the new hotness. I mean, like, wow, you want to talk about immersion. So again, because there are some detailed airports, like an airport that I love, I have a strong connection to, is Midway Airport in Chicago, and it's by Fly Tampa. Beautiful airport, but the jetways don't actuate, they don't move. So you kind of have to balance, you know, I want something really detailed, and it might have a connection to it, because you really should get an airport that you're connected to, but it may not have all the bells and whistles that you may be looking for. But that's a judgment call. So anyway, let's just say that we have gone through all of our flight procedures. Now we're, you know, ready for pushback, and we're getting pushback to depart. Excuse me. So you see the vehicles that's helping with the immersion. Now, will you be focusing on that? No, you've got things to do. You're going through your checklists, especially if you're into study level aircraft. You're really trying to, you know, really have a full flight experience. And don't get me wrong, I know that there are those that are into study level aircraft, and there's some that just want to get in the cockpit and fly. And especially for you guys that like commercial aircraft, but you want to get in the cockpit and fly, it's all about the eye candy. It's all about the experience. So you really do want to start off with a couple of good airports to help the immersion into the experience. And if you're into the study level aircraft, it's just that it's just that more important for the immersion, because while you're going through your proceedings, these little things in the peripheral are going on that make you feel, you know, just like a real airline pilot. At least it does for me. So, okay, so let's just say that we've been pushed back far enough, and we're going to get ready to taxi to the airport. Taxi to the runway. Now, if we're, and again, I'm going to say this is really for the benefit of showing off the airport, so forgive me that I'm not going through all of the proper procedures. Let's go on and get my tracker IR, tracker 5 on. So, as you're taxiing to your, as you're taxiing for departure, you're also seeing the vibrant and alive airport around you. You get to look over the terminals. You'll see other aircraft, and with the really good scenery, those aircraft that are about to go for pushback, the gates actually push, you know, the jetways depart, you know, push back from them as well. So again, it all helps with this immersion of the flight experience. I mean, even the flight hangars. Check out the hangar that's to the down the way on down the runway, down the taxiway. Sorry, on the left. I mean, like, wow, that is beautiful. Look at the traffic that's off in the distance. I usually keep my traffic pretty low because I don't want it to bog down my system, but I do have to admit I like the eye candy, and you know, let it run, because it just helps me feel a little bit more into the whole situation. Now, what you're going to turn on and the level of detail that you'll have, that's going to be a function of the kind of computer you have and the horsepower that you're running. But, you know, I'm thinking of doing a series on just the horsepower and what's a get-by system, what's the bells and whistles system. But I'll focus on that for another video. But okay, so now we're coming up on the runway, and as you can see, I'm going to go over here to the first officers, and check out that grass. Oh my gosh! I mean, like they kind of like need to mow it. They need to go like hire somebody to handle that because it's a little distracting. I mean, beautiful airport, dude. Do your garden work. No, I'm kidding. All right, so we're coming up on the runway, and this is another. I'm about to show you something that I consider to be another argument as to why, if you're into commercial flights, why you might want to focus on aircraft before you focus on terrain. Now let's just say that we went, we talked to tower and everything, and looking out there. Yeah, we don't have anything on approach, so we don't have to worry about killing thousands of people. So let's just say we're coming to our runway. Look at those tire marks on the runway. Oh my gosh, that just, I know, quit drooling and just get on with the video. I mean, it's just clear that this is a wonderfully rendered airport. Okay, so let's just say that we're ready for departure. Let me give the aircraft some flaps, or we're going to be treated to some warning bells that make you look like a dude. Alright, so as soon as our flaps are down, we'll actually depart, and we'll see. Now, while we're here waiting for that, check out the airport. All of this is a part of the experience. It is beautiful, it is wonderfully rendered, and I'm very fortunate to have a computer that can handle and keep these frame rates. Now right now, I'll just show you, let me do a look here. Yeah, right now I'm rocking about somewhere between 29 and 30 frames per second. That's going to be like really smooth. So, and then mine is not a high-end computer. I would call my computer a really good, great computer. And what I mean by that is it's on the higher end, but it's pretty average for your high-end computers. It's not just to pull the stops out, custom water cooling kind of computer. Nothing like that. I'm actually running. You can look in the show notes down below. I'm running a Intel i7 4700K.
Alive.
But okay, so let's get on down the runway and get this going.
80 knots.
So now as we accelerate for departure, you can appreciate the renderings for the runway. But here's something interesting for all you commercial pilots. Take a look at what you're seeing outside of the runway. Now we're reaching our V-speeds. Actually, I far surpassed them while I'm talking.
Positive rate of climb.
Positive rate, 0. Okay. So, as we are accelerating and departing the airport, what do you see? You don't see the airport. So if you were general aviation, that's gone. So no bang for your buck there. Remember, you weren't doing as much as you were doing if this was a commercial aircraft. You do see a little bit of the rendering outside the window, and that's cool, but if you're doing commercial aircraft, you're kind of busy because you have your after takeoff flows to go through on your checklist. So you get to see some things coming out of the airport, and like with Prepared version 4, if you're able to do the clouds and the shadowing, that's a great effect. I love that effect. I just can't do without it. Once I turned that on, there was no way I was turning it off. It looks beautiful. But there's only a certain amount of time I'm going to get to enjoy that because, like I said, I have to do my I have to do my flows. I have to prepare the aircraft, and I'm listening to air traffic control, especially if I'm on VATSIM. VATSIM, you got to pay attention to controllers. You don't have time to just necessarily just look at the eye candy. It's in the peripheral. It adds to the experience. It's just not the focus. So that being said, the terrain is kind of secondary for if you're into the commercial flying, because especially if you're doing the study level aircraft. So take the whole commercial subgroup, because I said you have to break yourself down into general aviation and civilian. General aviation commercial. Break that into 2 subgroups. Casual flyers and study level flyers. If you're into study level where you want to know everything there is to know about the airplane and do the flight procedures that the flight pilots do, you're going to be busy and not necessarily enjoying all of the scenery. If you're into just getting in the cockpit and going, you still are going through the flight experience. So you want the eye candy, but I would say get nicely rendered aircraft, because you're going to be really seeing up close your cockpit, your detailed mesh scenery. That's going to be secondary. Now you can kind of see there's a lot of autogen vegetation, there's a lot of autogen scenery. That looks beautiful, and in time you do need to get that experience. But if you're just starting out, that's not your biggest priority. You're going to spend most of your time in the air and at the terminals. So if you're into commercial aircraft, invest in a couple of good airports. If you're into civilian general aviation aircraft, invest in the terrain, because you're going to be flying over that and you're going to be at the level where you can see the detail throughout your entire flight. Now, there's a couple other things I want to point out. Let's take a look at our aircraft here. Let's bring our flaps up because we're doing pretty good speed now. Sorry about that. And if we zoom out here, take a look at the airplane. Take a look. The higher up you go, the less detail you can see in terms of your autogen trees and your autogen buildings. You kind of see it down at the bottom of your screen, but as you're getting further out, as you can see, what you're looking at is the vegetation, but that's the coloration of the vegetation in the fields, not the autogen. And so if you have invested all of this money in, say, Orbx global base, you're not getting, and maybe Pilot's Mesh, ultimate scenery, you're not getting to appreciate the topography of areas that are generally flat when you're flying commercial aircraft, because you're getting up to cruising altitudes. Let's see, we've got here, let's go ahead and put on autopilot. You're going to be flying at altitudes anywhere from 25,000 to 36,000, 38,000 feet. So you're not going to see that detail. So if you're starting out and you find you like commercial aircraft, your bang for the buck is going to best be in your airports. If you're just starting out and you're into civilian aircraft, your best bang for your buck is going to be getting your terrain. And then the last thing that I will offer in terms of advice is maybe doing something where you get the best of both worlds. There are some developers that release airports that not only have the airport, but they have the outlying scenery. One of them that I don't own this particular airport yet, but I'm going to get it, is Dubai by Fly Tampa. And it is a beautifully rendered airport, but it also has the skyline and many of the geographic features of Dubai. And there's some beautiful things to see if you're doing VFR flying. You have the Palm Island, which is a community built on islands that make a palm tree. There's the World Islands, which is basically you can buy an island and all these islands end up making something that looks like the globe. It's totally crazy. Then you have the world's tallest building. I forget the name of it. I'm going to say it wrong, so forgive me. I'm not going to try. But there's all of that VFR scenery, so you get to enjoy it on a beautiful approach or departure if you're in a commercial aircraft. But there's also beautiful VFR flying if you're into civilian general aviation. So if you're going to start out, if you're doing again, if you're doing the general aviation, get the terrain in mesh. If you're doing the commercial, get a couple of good airports. If you can swing it, get the best of both worlds. Get a couple of airports that have terrain and scenery along with it. And I think that's going to help you maximize your experience starting out in Flight Simulator. So now we're flying, let's see, we're at flight level 19,000 feet. And as you can see, autogen scenery is an afterthought at this point. As you can see, you have the coloration of vegetation, and global base does give you that. Take nothing from it. Even at this altitude, this is going to look better than the stock scenery from Prepared or Microsoft Flight Simulator. But again, we're prioritizing based on the fact that you're new to the genre and you're trying to get into it. So that being said, the terrain is not going to necessarily give you the mileage if you're into the commercial aircraft. Well, that basically brings us to the end of this tutorial in terms of what scenery should I buy if I'm just starting out. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's some things that I left out, or you thought there's some things that I kind of got wrong, leave a comment. Be gentle and sensitive. Leave a comment down below. If there's some things that you'd like me to do a tutorial on, or you think would be helpful, leave that in the comment box as well. And I'd just appreciate it if you give me a couple of likes and you subscribe. I would hope that this gets enough popularity that I can have some revenue to help me buy more airports and do more tutorials to help you, the flight simmer, enjoy their experience and just really be into this and love it the way that I have grown to love it and enjoy it. With that being said, I look forward to you tuning into the next episode, and I will see you in the virtual sky.